Good morning. It's Jeff Christian of CPM Group. Welcome to the 2024 edition of Silver Facts and Fantasies. This presentation will go on for a while. We want to thank our sponsors. You will notice there are mining companies and exploration and development companies ranging from Fortuna and Dolly Varden, Metallic Minerals. We listed twice, Pan American Silver, Silver Corp, Simda, and Sunshine Silver. We also have the Silver Institute joining us this year. I think they may have sponsored us in the past. I'm not quite sure. Prospector News, EELO Solutions, which is a company that provides energy and other improvements to mining companies. Kitco Media, Coral and Economics Report, and Monex Precious Metals, which is one of the largest and most reputable precious metals outlets in the United States. So we have a diverse group. Unfortunately, for the conspiracy theorists who like to badmouth me, you'll see there are no large banks on there, that list, because large banks basically are not our clients. They see us as people who limit their profitability by providing information and advisory services that help producers, refiners, smelters, industrial users, and investors do better, often at the expense of their financial counterparts. The format and the questions, we started these Silver Facts and Fantasies in 2021. We did it for one big reason, and that was that the PDAC, the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, was not organizing its large annual conference. And we always have a silver reception on opening night, Sunday night, at the PDAC. We started it 20 years ago, so doing the math, that would have been 2005. And we continued. We were interrupted in 2021. And the sponsors of that silver reception, which brings in hundreds of people with an interest in silver to that reception, said, why don't we do this online? At the same time, the silver market was being polluted by the Wall Street silver crowd and all the garbage there. And little Mikey Maloney was talking about silver going to $5,000. And those silver producers that sponsor our silver reception and are sponsoring this, and other people said, it would be great to have an opportunity to put forth some good information, talk about the facts of the silver market, and dispel or try to counter. You can't get some people to stop believing things, even with facts, because beliefs are based on beliefs, and to change your belief based on facts and reality is heresy, and then you get burnt at a stake, at least in some countries. It'd be good to try to counter some of the fantasies that are going around, because they're creating an irrational expectations on the part of some investors. So we started it in 2021. 2022, the PDAC resumed its conferences. And we said, well, we'll go back to the silver reception. And our sponsors there said, no, we want you to restart the silver reception, but we also want you to continue doing this annual Silver Facts and Fantasy online seminar the week before the PDAC. So the PDAC starts Sunday, March 3rd. And here we are today. We've been doing it. And it has grown in popularity. We do post this on the internet, I think on YouTube after the fact, so it can be reviewed forever, unfortunately. But there it is. So that's the origin of this. And it's an open question and answer period. And I'll jump down to number 5. We had well over 140 questions sent in by people registering to tune into this, as well as to ask questions. And we've got a presentation with a number of those questions on here. There are so many that we can't deal with them all. We'll run today's seminar as long as we want. If we see people dropping off after 90 minutes or 2 hours. We'll wrap it up. But yeah, there's a tremendous amount of things there. You can also ask questions during the event by typing them into the question area. Sorry about the typo, area of the webinar dashboard. And my colleague and business partner, Carlos Sanchez and Elliot Carlson, are watching that, and they can interrupt me. But we have more questions already in this presentation than probably we can get to in a reasonable period of time. And it's interesting because in 2024, this sort of information is critical again, or you could say still, but we have another round of bad information flooding the silver market with crazy expectations for prices and irrational comments about how much silver is used in missiles or in solar power, or is going to be used in solar power, and how high the silver price is going to go once the dollar and the global financial system collapse. And so it's critical again to spend a couple hours and let's talk about what's the reality of the silver market and what's the unreality or the fantasies about it. Yeah, because there are levels of good information and there are levels of bad information. And you will see some people who are generally trying to get it right, but they are missing certain points and they put out bad reports, and not bad reports, but just inaccurate reports, and they misrepresent what's going on in the silver market. They don't understand forwards. They don't understand inventories, things like that. But then there are other people who consciously spread misinformation because of where they are in the business. We have an enormous number of attendees too. And then, as I said, this will be posted online for our viewing after the event. A lot of questions, really good questions that have been sent in. And it speaks to the idea that if you don't get your question asked, you might want to consider becoming a CPM client of some sort, because we have quarterly open forums, which are online Q&A periods for our clients. And a client can be somebody who has bought yearbooks or somebody who is paying us to advise them as to how to wisely invest, manage their exposure to precious metals and other commodities. And those quarterly open forums give you the ability to ask the questions if we didn't get to them now. So having wasted that much time, what CPM Group is. We do get questions like, who are you? Why should we listen to you? This is a series of reports. The thing in the upper left-hand corner is actually a Handy and Harman silver report. When I assumed control of the research department at J. Aron, which was a trading company in 1980, J. Aron and Handy and Harman were the two companies that produced basic estimates of silver supply, demand, and inventories. Handy and Harman was a refinery and manufacturer of silver fabricated and semi-fabricated products. It was broken up into the refining business, which went out of business a few years ago, a couple decades ago, and the fabricating division. A lot of parts have been sold off to other companies, but it still exists in some form somewhere. But they produced this small booklet every year, starting at the turn of the last century. And then they ended it in the 90s after CPM Group had spun off from where we were. The report next to it is an early 1970s J. Aron Silver Review and Outlook. The report next to that is the annual Silver Review and Outlook that we produced, I think, in 1980. The first year that I came and from J. Aron. I had been a reporter following energy technologies, and metals markets and other international business. And I came over and assumed running the research department at J. Aron. J. Aron published these big books. So Handy and Harman published smaller books, and we cooperated. We swapped data. There was another company, Consolidated Goldfields, which was a gold mining company headquartered in London, but most of its mining at that time, well, They had Redison goldfields in Australia. They had goldfields of South Africa. They had goldfields mining in Denver. And then they had a couple other companies, and they had Amy Roadstone, which was a quarry company. And they produced gold reports, as did J. Aaron, and we cooperated with them. Consolidated Goldfields was taken over by someone named Hanson in London, and he broke it up, and that department was liquidated. It was reincarnated with new people as Goldfields Mineral Service. Goldfields of South Africa immediately said, you may not use the Goldfields name, so they became GFMS, and they were our ersatz competitors for a while. So those are the reports prior to 1986. J. Aaron merged into Goldman Sachs in 81. I became the head of commodities research at Goldman Sachs. In 1986, we spun off and we created CPM Group. And we're producing these reports. You can see the little silver year survey down there. We're producing silver, gold, and platinum surveys on a quarterly basis. And the report next to it is the World Silver Survey. I'll get back to that in a second. The silver surveys that we produced became the Silver Yearbook. They were published for a while by John Wiley, and then a company called Metals Bulletin was our publisher, and then we started self-publishing them ourselves. And the report next to that is one of our Silver Yearbooks that's translated into Chinese and distributed in China by our partner in this event, which is Huatong Silver Exchange in China. We also have our gold and platinum yearbooks translated and distributed in China by the China Gold Association, China National Gold Corp, and some other companies. In terms of the silver survey, and I've discussed this in videos, in the late 1980s, the silver price was falling steadily, and investment demand was falling steadily too. I'll show you some charts in a second about that. And the silver producers, through the Silver Institute, came to CPM Group and hired us as consultants. They said, why is the silver price falling? It's $50 briefly in 1980. It's $5 now. And we explained that there was a lack of investment demand. People weren't buying as much silver as they had been. And other investors were selling silver. And there was a lack of silver investment marketing at that time. In 1980, even Sears Roebuck was selling silver in its stores. And most banks and brokerages were doing that too. By 1986, Sears had stopped selling silver and gold. And many of the banks and brokers that had research groups that used CPM groups or J. Aaron, Goldman Sachs, or Heenan Harness data, and they had research reports based on our data or using our data. They had gotten out of the business. So companies weren't selling silver to investors, and investors weren't buying as much silver. So the Silver Institute bought the right for initial 5-year contract to take a stripped down version of our silver survey and create the World Silver Survey. And we did that with them, and our contract said that we had total editorial control. We didn't want to be seen as being too bullish. And that caused issues with some of the producers that were members and paying the fees at the Silver Institute because they wanted us to be more bullish than we were comfortable being. So after those first 5 years, we stopped doing the World Silver Survey and continued to do ours, but we started taking sponsors to help underwrite the research. And that's important because one of the issues that's come up this year are people questioning the accuracy and the unbiased nature of the World Silver Survey. And I don't really want to get into that, but I guess I have to some extent. And I'll make some comments about it perhaps later. We don't like to talk about other people's research. We like to talk about the market and what our research tells us. But yeah, that is the origin of the World Silver Survey, but we've had nothing to do with it since 1994. So one of the questions, why should I listen to CPM Group? Could you present your buy and sell recommendations for silver over time and the outlook for 2024 and forward? And the answer is yes, but I won't give you the outlook going forward. These are our intermediate term buy and sell recommendations since I took over the J. Aaron Research Department in December 1st, 1980, till today. You can see that from 1980 through 2005, 2001, we were largely telling people, well, 65, 70% of the time, we were saying, don't buy silver as an intermediate term investment. If anything, go short. 2001, we shifted and we said, no, the price has been bumping along between $3.50, $5.50 for about 10, 15 years. You'll see some data about that in a minute. And so it's time to buy. And we stayed with that buy recommendation until April of 2011. Then we said sell. And then around 2018, 19, 2020, we said buy. And we have that buy recommendation on. This is for the next 2 or 3 years. If you're an investor with a 2 to 3 to 5 year time horizon, we would be telling you to buy silver at this point. If you're a shorter term investor, there are much more frequent buy and sell recommendations. And if you're a longer term investor, like a permanent investor, then there's a different attitude that we have toward it. But on an intermediate term, 2 to 3 years, we are saying buy. And we are saying buy today too, even at $22, $23 an ounce. We think that the price of silver has the capacity to rise over the next couple of years. There are a lot of questions about what our price expectations are. And I'll tell you some of them as we go forward. So we still have that buy recommendation in place. And, why do you listen to us? Why should you listen to us? We have a good track record. We haven't been saying for 10, 20, 40 years, hey, the price of silver is going to $100 or $750 or $5,000. We have had buy and sell recommendations based on unbiased research. And the fact that we've got a really good track record suggests that our research is pretty accurate as well as being unbiased. Another question was, what are the key items to monitor in 2024? And there are about 5,000 of them, maybe. There are fundamental issues. In the silver market, you should be looking at mine production. You should be looking at secondary recovery levels because those fluctuate more sharply. Mine development announcements, issues related to regulatory environment and resource nationalism. We have a couple of questions about Mexico and AMLO's desire to ban open pit mining, which is probably a non-event. We need to monitor it. Fabrication demand, trends in solar power. A lot of bullishness about solar power, but last year the solar panel industry overbuilt by a very large margin the number of solar panels. They bought a lot of silver. They made a lot of solar panels. They installed a lot of solar panels, but they have an enormous inventory that's hanging over that market right now. So they don't need as much silver now as they did last year and as they will in the future. So solar panels, electronics and electric vehicles, a typical car uses an ounce of silver. A typical electric vehicle uses about 1.5 ounces of silver, maybe 2. So if you continue to see a shift toward electric vehicles, you'll see an increased use in all of the electronics in automobiles. Even if you don't see that shift, just the automobiles are being loaded up with ever more electronics. So there will be an increase in silver use in each car. Economic factors probably much more important, and there are just an enormous number to watch. Monetary policy needs to be monitored, but it is actually secondary to fiscal policy. And then fiscal policy is secondary to actual real economic activity in a given country. How much are people producing of various goods and services? And how much are people buying of goods and services? And how does that have an effect on interest rates, inflation, currency markets, overall economic activity, people's comfort levels, their sense of economic and financial security, financial market stability? And all of those factors are important in each country. The United States obviously is the largest economy, and it has the dollar, which is the predominant denominator for wealth on a global basis. So the U.S. economy is obviously very important, but China, Europe, the United Kingdom, Russia, Brazil, all of Latin America, all of Southeast Asia, all of East Asia, all of South Asia, all of those things are very important, and you have to pay attention to all of them. Financial market stability is also very important in each of those countries and jurisdictions. And then what we've been saying for a year now is that in 2024 and probably into 2025, political issues, both domestic and international political issues, will probably be much more important in determining investor interest and demand levels for silver and gold than they have been in the past. They usually take a back seat to economic and financial issues. But given the state of the world and given the state of various countries with the rise of nationalism and tribalism, really is what it is, political factors probably are much more important this year, and maybe even more important than economic and financial market. I will say one last thing. I mentioned it in the beginning. People tend to focus on monetary policy and they tend to blame the Fed. Monetary policy and Fed policy actually cue off of fiscal policy and the real economic environment. And if you want to know what the state of the economy is and where it's going, and if you want to know where the problems have come from, monetary policy is not the right place. Politicians will gladly have you trash the Fed, let you blame the Fed for what the politicians have done. So monetary policy is important. But if you really want to know where the world's going, you have to look much more at fiscal policy and the actual real economy.